Welcome to Two Angry Men, the newest podcast with Los Angeles Magazine's own Mark Geragos and TMZ's Harvey Levin, where the two get together and talk about the biggest legal stories of the day. Enjoy.
Will Rajah Jackson be charged for attempted murder? Why is the mother of the Minnesota shooter getting a criminal defense lawyer? Where are the Epstein files? Tell us the most bizarre case you've ever worked on. Why is Mark Geragos so defensive and angry?
Welcome to the Two Angry Men podcast with a guest today, Mark.
And one of my two favorite. I mean, he's there, and you have another guy in your world that's also one of my favorites.
Anakin, but today Branson is here. We're going to do something different on the podcast today. Mark and I were talking, and there's so much going on that rather than doing one topic, what we did was we opened this up to everybody. We do a live stream at TMZ every day, and we told people in the live stream, give us questions about anything. If you have legal problems, tell us what they are, and we'll talk about them. If you want to talk about some of the big cases that are out in the news, we'll talk about them. So Branson put together a lot of these questions, and they're really good, Mark, and they're just a wide variety of stuff.
And by the way, give the backdrop, because last week I was so angry. I was angry.
You were so angry.
I was so angry. So I said this week, and I'm very zen this week, and I didn't want to get you fired up before a 3-day weekend. So I figured, what the heck? Why don't we?
I think it's gonna be great.
Why don't we kind of let people who watch or listen curate?
And this is the way I started my media career, was on radio, where I did exactly this. So I'm excited. Okay, Branson, hit it.
All right, first question. This comes from Marie Alina. Kim Kardashian just took the California State Bar. With that being said, if she does pass, how successful and committed to law and criminal justice reform do you think she will be, considering she's always maintaining focus on business ventures?
Mark?
Wow, I can definitely answer this. Look, I know Kim. I love Kim. I think that her passion for this, I mean, first of all, you have to understand a couple of things. Her father, who was a accomplished lawyer and left us way too soon, but Robert, I think is smiling ear to ear at the success of his kids, number one. Number two, I can't think of anything as more of a tribute from Kim to her dad than her becoming a lawyer. And do I think she would be successful? I think wildly successful. In fact, you may be back here after she passes with me trying to get her to do a co-counsel a case with me.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen. And she is going to be, I couldn't agree more, wildly successful. Okay, hit it.
All right, this comes from April Wine. I want to know, when an attorney knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that their client is guilty, how do you consciously defend that person, and how does it feel when they get off?
Okay, I'm guessing April Wine is not a real name, but that's just me. But I will tell you, my father, who, if you've ever heard me talk, I always invoke, who was my hero and a lawyer, he always said, and I believe it, it does not bother me when I don't lose sleep over guilty clients. I lose sleep over the innocent clients. Because first of all, guilt is a hard thing to say. You can be charged with killing somebody. If you are charged with killing somebody, it can range from first-degree murder, capital offense, death penalty, all the way down to involuntary manslaughter. I had a case this morning in the LA Superior Court where my client was charged with murder. I got an involuntary manslaughter because that's all the case was worth. By the way, you'll love this, Harvey. I did walk over to one of the deputies who just happened to be in the courtroom, who was on the Menendez case, and whispered in his ear, by the way, this is what imperfect self-defense is worth in LA Superior Court.
Okay.
Yes.
We're going to move on.
From Brandy, the mother of the Minnesota shooter is getting a criminal defense lawyer. Why?
Well, she's getting a criminal defense lawyer because parents are now on the hook increasingly criminally for what their children do when they become violent and people die. If they had reason to know it was coming and they either failed to stop it or facilitated it. And we have now seen parents being convicted of manslaughter. And this seems to be the trend. And frankly, this is an element of how to curb this out of control shooting, where you put some responsibility on people who have a duty to supervise. And that's exactly what's happening in some states. We don't know if it's going to happen here. The mother, as far as I know, I don't even know that she's talked to police at this point, but clearly she has heard the stories about other parents being charged and even convicted. And so this is unsurprising.
At all. I couldn't agree more. I mean, you hit it spot on.
This comes from JL1019. He asks, will Raja Jackson be charged for attempted murder?
Raja Jackson, for people who don't know, he is the son of Rampage Jackson, the UFC fighter. Raja also does martial arts. He was in a wrestling ring a week ago, exactly a week ago, against a guy named Psycho Sid. And it seems Raja was pissed off at Psycho Sid, and he body slammed him and then started viciously punching him. I mean, this was not scripted. It wasn't supposed to happen. He just went off, almost killed Psycho Sid, almost killed him. And he's still in the hospital. Psycho Sid is still in the hospital. This was brutal, violent, under the law. You take a UFC fighter, his hands are considered a deadly weapon under the law. And when you use them uncontrollably and you pummel over and over and over at their face and have to be yanked off finally, to me, that is attempted murder. There is video of this, and it is appalling. The LAPD is investigating. We will see. But I got to tell you, if that's not attempted murder, I don't know what is.
You know, and interestingly, you mentioned that old saw about the trained fighter being a deadly weapon. Shod feet, SHOD, and your hands can, and the force that you use can give you a deadly weapon as well. So you don't necessarily need a weapon per se. Feet, hands can be that. Something that traditionally you would not think of as a weapon could be that. And to your first point, if it were scripted, and I know you said, if it were scripted and even got out of control, that still, there is some potential for a prosecutor to look at that and say, no, you've exceeded what the consent was.
This was, when you see it, it is appalling.
Next question. 2 words. This comes from 2 words, suck it. If the Menendez brothers were not related, would they have a better chance at parole?
You know, it's fascinating to me. Somebody sent me today
That's interesting.
a case out of Canada where 2 sisters were acquitted at trial, and now the Crown, apparently you can appeal, the prosecution can appeal an acquittal. You can't do that in the US. It made me think about what I always say. Harvey, you've heard me say this 100 times. If they were the Menendez sisters, or if Eric had been Erica, you never would have seen, they wouldn't be in custody.
I agree with you on that. But I think the question is, if they were unrelated and killed 2 people like Jose and Kitty, because I think the answer is
what do you
they
mean?
have a better.
If they were unrelated to Jose and Kitty.
Well, no, if they were unrelated to each other, if they weren't brothers, but they were just friends and they did it.
If they
I think the brothers make it
abused or then been the prey to the predator.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking there's this kind of a cabal-like thing with 2 brothers that you might not have if they were 2 people who weren't blood relatives. I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
It is an interesting question, which is why I'm asking the other questions, because it's very layered.
Yeah. Okay.
This comes from Joseph Leahy. Is it possible that someone could be set up by the police in Los Angeles? A person can be harassed to the point where they crack.
Wow. There was a huge scandal in LA called at the Rampart Division, where that really did happen, where people were set up, and it was a massive ring. There were prosecutions, there was reform. Um, and, the LAPD cleaned itself up for a long time. But are there cases where cops cross the line? I mean,
Look, not only LAPD, I remember one that I had in Utah where the mother had come into the office because she couldn't get anybody to take the case, and her daughter had been killed. And as it turned out, we had the only way I could get a lead was to buy a billboard and say, if you know anything about this. We did get a lead from a reserve cop. And it turned out they had to disband the police department because what they were doing was taking the drugs out of the evidence room and then reselling, and she knew about it, and she ended up getting executed because of that. I mean, it
really?
was an awful set of circumstances. I've had it in other jurisdictions as well. It's one of the reasons that I kind of take these cases around the country that involve police shootings or deaths. A lot of times you find in the police shooting situations that it's the department itself that's rotten to the core.
When I was a reporter at CBS in Los Angeles, um, it's sort of semi-related. Um, I got hold of 100 internal affairs files of cops, and they all related to cops who were beating their wives and girlfriends and how the department turned a blind eye to it. And it was really shocking. I remember one where internal affairs looked at it and said, well, in defense of the officer, she was a bad housekeeper.
Yeah, well,
And well, no, and I got to tell you, that story had an impact, and I think that a lot has been cleaned up. But one of the things I've learned in my career is that you shine a light on something, and then it gets cleaned up, and then over time it goes back to a lot of times where it was before.
LAPD's had a history of that. I mean, frankly, we've got the former sheriff, Jim McDonald, who's now the LAPD chief, has done a yeoman's job,
Yeah.
both at the sheriff's department and now at LAPD. And I'm not a guy who normally is complimentary, but give credit where credit is due.
Yep.
Dennis Gorge asks, for both angry men, tell us the most bizarre case you've worked on.
Oh God.
I'll give you the one that nobody's ever heard about, which I just to this day won't believe or can't believe. There used to be a time when the Beverly Hills Courthouse on Burton Way was where you would do criminal cases that came out of Beverly Hills. And the judges who were assigned there, they loved it there, but they always complained that everybody thought they were so important that it was a pain in the ass. But there was one case there that I will never forget. We took it to preliminary hearing, and it was a forgery case, and my client was blind. And I just couldn't get over the fact that my blind client was being charged with forgery. And the judge ended up, to his credit, dismissing the case at a preliminary hearing. But I just thought that was one of the most bizarre things, that they were actually getting on the stand and testifying that this guy was blind and couldn't see, had forged the documents.
Oh my God. For me, it's actually covering a case, but it was really the case that put TMZ on the map, the Mel Gibson DUI case on Pacific Coast Highway, where, he went through this, torrent of anti-Semitic slurs and was just acting crazy at the jail, breaking the phone and all. And the cops were lying to me about this all day when we were working on the story, telling me he never did this. If you do the story, you're going to ruin your career. You're going to ruin TMZ. And they said he never went on this anti-Semitic rant. And then I got hold of the 4 pages that were taken out of the report. So because for whatever reason the sheriff's department did, and I have theories, they took 4 pages out where all of this was contained. And then I called them up and they came clean. So we did this story. And I remember that I called up Mel's person, who's a good guy, and I said, look, here's the story that we're about to do. That Mel Gibson allegedly got drunk at Moonshadows in Malibu, got in his car, was driving. He was pulled over by an officer. He started using anti-Semitic slurs, saying the Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world, and on and on and on. They took him to the station. He was jumping around in the cell, that he broke the phone. He called one of the sergeant's sugar tits, and on and on and on. And I'm going through this whole thing. And he said, can I get back to you? So I gave him some time and he called me back and I'm thinking, God, he's just going to deny this whole thing. And what am I going to do? And all I get back was, he didn't say sugar tits.
Tits. I remember this. I was just going to say, all I remember is the denial of sugar tits.
Right. And I thought, that's all you're telling me? So that ranks there. Okay.
Yes.
All right, someone's bringing you guys a personal legal situation here from Faye Vixen saying, if I'm looking at houses to buy and fall on the property breaking my hip, who is liable? Real estate agency or owner of the property or me?
I can answer that. So when you fall, that does not automatically make the property owner or the person in control of the property liable. Falling is not in itself, does not in and of itself create liability. What has to happen is there has to be some dangerous condition on the property. For example, if there's if the cement isn't level and people could easily trip as they're walking. So a reasonable person would trip over it and fall. It's called, what they call it in the law is a dangerous instrumentality on the property. So if you have a condition like that, then the property owner and or the person in control of the premises would be liable. But falling in and it's like in a supermarket. If somebody knocks a glass jar of pickles off the shelf, and water is strewn all over the floor, and somebody runs over from the store and they actually try to clean it up, and somebody slips, in the 5 seconds before, the store would not be liable because they have to take reasonable steps to prevent it. But if they leave it there for any unreasonable amount of time, they're going to be liable.
Right. And if you wanted to attach liability to build on that to the real estate agent who's showing the property, you would have to probably make a plausible case that the real estate agent had staged the place or the location or the house in such a way that they had a responsibility to have kept you safe or been negligence-free.
That's a stretch. That's a stretch.
Well,
no. I mean, it's a stretch to hold the real estate agent liable in a case like that.
They wouldn't be. By the way,
no, listen to the plaintiff's lawyer.
Well, sue first and ask questions later.
All right, back to cases in the news. Sean Adams asks, can Ronald Goldman's family still go after the O.J. Simpson estate, or is it over?
Well, I know something about this. So O.J.'s estate is in probate, but it hasn't been probated yet. Fred Goldman, Ron Goldman's dad, he has filed a creditor's claim for $117 million. Remember, he got a civil judgment of $33 million, and it's grown over the years because O.J. didn't pay anything. And so...
Fun fact, who were the lawyers in that trial, the civil trial? Do you remember?
Daniel Petrocelli.
Very good. He went on to... I think now is the managing or litigation
of
head at
O'Melveny. He is brilliant.
Who was the brilliant lawyer. Who was the defense lawyer?
Baker. Bob Baker.
Very good. Dang, I bet you there's not 25 people who could get both of those things right.
I knew them both, and they, I covered the case. But the trick is going to be what's in the estate. And I don't know the answer to that. It's in Nevada, and they haven't made that public. So, a lot of times you can keep money out of probate depending on how you do the estate plan. And O.J. made a career out of keeping money from Fred Goldman. So I don't know how much money is in there because he
one
knew.
Of the things, the NFL pension was one of the ways,
and that was exempt, and the pension is exempt.
Exactly. This is a great question, by the way.
Yeah.
Lise MDS asks, will Mark Geragos appeal? What has been done since the board? Do we know when Gavin Newsom will give us his answer? In the meantime, anything Mark can do?
Menendez.
Yes, on Menendez. Yes, on both counts. We will not let the parole hearing rulings stand. It's amazing to me because there are a lot of people who say, what are you complaining about? It was the lowest denial, 3 years. And what I complain about, and what I complain about bitterly, is I get that, but it was not a fair hearing. So there will be a challenge to the hearing. They did not get due process, and there were some shenanigans going on. The governor's office has already stated, not to me, but I think to one of Harvey's sister reporters, that clemency is still in place. So we plan on pursuing that. And at the same time, remember, we've got the habeas live in the criminal courts building in front of Judge Ryan. So we've got 3 different ways, and we're moving forward. I work on it every day.
Glenn Clevenger asks, where are the Epstein files and why is Trump still president?
Okay, well, he's president because he was elected. So on the first, look, I just think people are so misdirected here. First of all, grand jury, the judge has already said we're not going to release the transcript. And I don't think you're going to get anything from the grand jury because it's so laser focused. On the Justice Department file, I know people who have seen it, and I'm told there's less there than meets the eye. That, it is not riddled with, there's no list. There is absolutely no list. And that, there are a lot of names mentioned, including Donald Trump's, but for the most part, not incriminating. The real fire here is in the civil cases, and especially in discovery, where there is information about people who went to that island. And 2 judges have protected that by redacting the names of the alleged perpetrators from public view. And that's where the action is, Mark.
Well, you mentioned the unsealing of the grand jury transcripts. So there were grand jury transcripts and grand jury proceedings. I think, Harvey, you and I talked about this, and I said there's not going to be anything of any great note in there because generally what happens in a grand jury is the prosecutor will march in an agent, sometimes a purported victim, but most of the times an agent, and the reason for that is the prosecutor doesn't want to wed the complaining witness, so-called victim, into a statement that's under oath that the defense lawyer is going to cross-examine on. So they bring the agent over to have the agent summarize and testify. Well, when the judge denied the Department of Justice motion to unseal the grand jury transcripts, he said exactly that. He said, I don't know if he gave a percentage, but the implication was 99% of this stuff is already out in the public, and this is more show than substance, or all flash, no cash, basically. And that's why he denied it. And then he kind of put the onus on the Department of Justice and said, you know better than this. You can do something here. I don't know if that's fair because arguably he doesn't know what's in the Department of Justice files. But I agree with you. I don't think, based on what I've seen and based on the fact that there was a public trial of Maxwell, I don't think that there's a list, and I don't think that there's anything that they are hiding as far as blackmail, extortion, and those kinds of things. I just don't buy that because they would have let it out earlier.
Yeah.
A previous administration.
Yeah.
Greg Bradley asks, do you know anything about Michael Jordan suing NASCAR? Who's going to win? They had a big showdown yesterday.
I don't know enough about that one.
Neither do I. I mean, the last time I dealt with NASCAR was Jeremy Mayfield, and that was too long ago for me to brush up that quick. So I'm going to pass.
Sorry.
Carrie Langston asks, do you need a will if you own a house but have not finished paying for it?
You don't need a will. You don't need a will. There's no law requiring you. There's something called intestate succession. So if you die without a will, there's a drill that, if you're married, it goes to the wife. And if you're not married and you have 2 kids, it'll go to the kids, and so on and so on. It varies from state to state. Do you need a will? If you have substantial assets, so suppose you own a house, but you have a mortgage on it, so you still have to pay a mortgage. If there's equity in the house and you have significant money, it's always a good idea, unless you are just fine with the rule of intestate succession. Otherwise, that's the reason to have one. And as lawyers go, getting a will is one of the less expensive things you can do if you do it right.
Well, and also it depends on, some people care greatly about what happens to their assets when they go and who gets them and who deserves them. And so that's the only way you're going to be able to control that for the most part is if you have a will, a trust, or some other kind of vehicle that you've created that will make your intentions known and have somebody to execute them.
Yeah.
Lauren Sexy Girl asks, legal question for two angry grandpas. Will Brooke Hogan still get something from the estate even though she took herself out of the will? Can she change her mind and still get something from the will?
That's a misconception. Brooke doesn't take herself out of the will. It's what Hulk Hogan did with the will. So if she is a beneficiary in Hulk's will, her desire may be, I'm not going to take the money, but the money is hers for the taking if she wants it. So everybody thinks, well, Brooke took her. Brooke doesn't take herself out. The
Yeah,
only thing
and
that matters is what he did.
And by the way, a lot of wills have a provision that I'm going to leave you, my son, X amount of dollars. If you challenge that and lose, you get zip.
Right.
From TYJ, he asks, should defense teams have to disclose payments for paid PR, paid for crowds, and other pre-trial paid media intended to sway public opinion or the jury?
I love that question.
Aaron Reed.
I love that question, Mark. That's
You know
a
why I
great.
love
That's
it?
a great
You know
one.
why I love it? Why is it? And this is part of my beef with litigation funding, which is also kind of one of these, you have to do a disclosure. It's starting to spread across the country. The idea, I don't have a problem disclosing that. If you're also going to say, I want to know what the government's doing, I want to know who they're leaking to in law enforcement, if it's a criminal case. If it's a civil case, I want to know what the corporate comms department is doing at that corporation, at that insurance company, or anywhere else. I have, in the last 3 trials I have done, which is amazing to me, and I've had jury consultants on the other side. I mean, if you're going to the point where you have a jury consultant for the defense or for the prosecution, which is amazing to me, I never saw it until the 90s is when it's kind of came in fashion. I don't understand why people want to pick on the defense. Remember, if you are charged with a crime federally, it's the United States of America versus you. So that's kind of a daunting prospect to have the entire United States against you. Why is it that you're then looking at what you as the individual is doing in order to try and even the playing field?
That's a fair point. Somebody who's in a different kind of has a different vantage point of it, me, I will tell you that it is so common that both sides try to sway public opinion pre-trial that it's almost funny. And that's why, to me, the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni case is so interesting because it puts that on trial. And, when the publicists are saying, oh, it's her, it's not me, it's all you guys. And I know it because we're on the receiving end of it all the time.
I was discussing this the other day on a podcast with Megan Kelly. And one of the things that strikes me that doesn't get articulated enough about that case is, don't you find, you would know this, Harvey, and I'll ask you, my opinion of what's going on is it's a battle of the PR people. I mean, there are PR people on both sides of that case, and it's almost like it's
they're litigants in this. They're all being sued.
Right, and they're all spinning as fast as they can and grabbing whoever they can.
I know, and the spin is, I didn't do it. Well, they all did it. They all did it.
All right, last 3 questions. Last 3. Edward Guyton asks, I wonder, will lawmakers get back to changing the gun laws after the shooting in Minnesota?
I hope so, and I doubt it. I got to tell you, the idea of assault weapons, everybody says there's an absolute right to own a gun in this country. No, there isn't. If you look, the First Amendment is considered in the preferred position of all the amendments. That's the law. Yet, You can't scream fire in a crowded movie theater. There are all, you can get sued for defamation. There are all sorts of limits to free speech. And, similarly, you can't say, well, the purpose of the Second Amendment had nothing to do with I have a right to have an assault weapon if I want to. That's not what it was about. But whatever.
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court would disagree with you after Heller. So,
Well, what I'm saying is, I don't know whether this is coming up again, but the idea that in this society you can have an assault weapon for sport or crime, where you can spray 100 bullets in a minute or more, and knowing what's going on in this country, to me, it's criminal not to make them illegal. It is just ridiculous what's going on in this country, but I don't think Congress is going to do it. I think they're bought off.
well, sadly, look, when you say that, I have argued for years in a completely different context that one of the most effective lobbies is the NRA, and the NRA has made almost a science out of the idea of taking people out strategically or tactically who are running, do not check off the boxes. And when I say take them out,
Yeah, I
not
love that.
literally,
Yeah.
but take them out of office, and they'll either fund the primary opponent or fund the opponent in the general. It's interesting also that there's been now, as of late, and as of these last, I don't know, 6 shootings, a whole discussion on what is traditionally called the right, about mental health and trans, and linking to people who are trans or identify, and then have been the ones who are accused of doing the shooting. I don't know if you've noticed that, Harvey, but that has been
It's so far beyond trans. It's not about trans. It's about about.
That's the new argument.
No, but you know what? There are plenty of just garden variety white males, or black males, or trans people. It's people who have mental illnesses who are doing this, or just evil people. And yeah, it would be great to make, to fund more for mental illness and do all of that. We're cutting programs for that. We're cutting. And even if you put money in, you're relying on every family in America to do the right thing, to see the right things. And it's so hard. Yeah, try it. And you're not going to solve it. Maybe you'll make it a little bit better. But make these freaking guns illegal, these assault weapons that have no business in this society. Anyway.
Well, I always default to look, we're talking about Jim McDonnell, who used to be the sheriff, and his predecessor used to say, Lee Baca, who was the sheriff here in LA, used to tell me that the LA criminal justice system and the sheriff's department was the largest mental health facility in the world, because the most people that they house who have mental health problems are in the jails here in LA. And that spills over. When I leave here, I'm going to go into what I now affectionately call Fentanyl Alley. It used to be called Lebanon Alley behind me, or on the corner here of Wilshire and Figueroa. And it's a teeming mass of addiction and mental health
and then then you got 14-year-old boys in school, and who knows, it's like, we got to get these guns off the street. Okay, last time.
I don't think it's binary. I don't think it's just one solution.
No, it needs to be a lot of stuff. But guns. Yeah, but you got to do something about these guns.
Is there anybody whose heart doesn't break when there's little kids praying?
Well, who cares if your heart breaks? Who cares if you're not going to do anything about it? It's like your heart breaking means nothing.
Well, I agree, and that's why we've got to deal with this. And guns. By the way, these questions are interesting too, because that's why, back to one of the original questions, that's why parents now are being held accountable or lawyering up.
Right. Okay, last two.
Nikki Brown asks, why is Mark so defensive and angry with 2 question marks on that?
Why do you think? Because I have to, I channel the title. What do you expect? And defensive, I think, is in my job description.
I guess that's right. Okay, last one.
All right, last question from Don't the Watcher. Legal question for you two. Do Harvey and Mark like each other?
Oh my God. That is the funniest thing because I got to tell you, my assistant, Anakin. So I call Mark yesterday at like 8 in the morning or text him. I call him and then I text him and I said, I need to talk to you about the podcast tomorrow. And he says, I'll call you in 15 minutes. An hour passes, 2 hour passes. 6:30 at night, I finally call. I leave a nasty message. You said you'd call me at 15 minutes 8 hours ago. And he says, I just called your office knowing that I had just left. And then my assistant calls me and he says, how can you be friends with this guy? He's better to me than he is to you.
Well, Anakin is nicer than you are.
Okay, so
Okay, I mean, but we've told this once many episodes ago, how far back we go and
back
all
a
of the
long way.
interconnections.
We
So,
go back
yes,
way,
we go
way,
way,
way
way. That's why we're
we were
angry and
not
old.
old when we started this.
Exactly. We could have been two happy young men.
No, we get along. We like each other.
We like each other. I actually channel my inner Bill Maher, which is one of the blessings in my 60s, but Harvey can't say this. One of the blessings in my 60s is my friendship with Harvey has been amplified more than it was for the last 50 years.
And I feel the same. I feel the
I
same
love
way.
it.
Oh God, this is too sappy. Okay, I'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks, Harvey.